Hello, everyone. I am Claudio Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire podcast, and my guest today is the renowned Cyndi Dale. Cyndi is an internationally renowned author, speaker, healer, business consultant, and the author of nearly 30 books about energy medicine, intuition, and spirituality. Cyndi is also set to appear in two upcoming documentaries. She seeks to unify the world's most vital spiritual messages, encouraging understanding and community among all peoples. In addition, Cyndi's helpful books, published in over 18 languages, reach many people worldwide and continue to enrich lives. Cyndi, thank you very much for joining the podcast today.
I'm thrilled to be here. And I already remarked on the wonderful chakra background that we are able to enjoy.
Yes, and I know your expertise is mainly in dealing with the chakra system, and we will get to that discussion. But at the beginning, I would like to start with what is your personal experience with shamans and plant medicine?
Well, I was one of those kids who was very psychic. So I could see spirits, talk to ghosts, believed in fairies because I was able to see them, got in trouble for my active imagination all the time. And so I really could not help but develop my intuitive gifts. Not that they were totally welcome in my family, as I've already inferred. And in fact, I shut my abilities down when I was a teenager. I was mad that I had to, kind of be odd or unusual. But I was also very fortunate that when they started opening back up in my early 20s, when I was in therapy as a client, I was able to travel in the world. I went to Peru and Bolivia and Costa Rica and eventually Morocco and other places and countries. And I was able to learn you could say real energy medicine, the stuff of the indigenous, the stuff in the villages, the stuff in the tribes where it's alive and not just out of books. Though I'm very book studied because I think science has a lot to contribute to our knowledge of being made out of energy, which we are, and Einstein said it. And I think at this point we all know it. I was able to really see it in real life and bring it into my own world and my client work too.
And that's the real energy where we connect with the plant spirits, with everyone surrounding us, with animal spirits. And I think we need that level of consciousness and out of the body experience, if I may say so, in order to connect with the realm which is not visible to us.
Exactly. One of my very favorite theories, it's called the idea of the imaginal realms. And it's actually a Sufi or an Arabic mystical model. And Carl Jung was into it. So were a number of other researchers. And it's even being studied right now at Harvard as a way to explain the soul and how we can interconnect with different places that are actually quite real. And so I usually see it as here I am just as a being, and around me or available to me are places that are just as, knock on wood, as we say, that are just as concrete, that are just as mundane as what's in the Muggle realm with Harry Potter. But the dense ones are close and the more etheric are farther away from our way of standing. And we can connect into any of them. Our soul is already in or on many of those pathways. And so it can be as simple as, sit down and petting your dog and having a sense of what your dog is going through, or opening up a little wider and going into a Lord of the Ring realm, or even farther, and there's another planet or a planetary being. And of course, shamans around the world have always interacted that way. They know all of it's real, but they also know how to make choices. Like, what do you want to connect with and what don't you want to connect with? So that's just as valid an issue to rise as what's available. It's like, what's intelligent for any culture or person to want to interact with as well.
Yes, and some shamans will tell you, you know what, I don't advise you to go into this ceremony maybe because it's not helpful. And I also discussed with some of my guests, and some of them were so psychic that they didn't need the help of plant medicine in order to open up more to this invisible realm. And others said, you know what, we don't want to go there. Others were quite fascinated and they experience it themselves. So now having this experience, would you recommend to your clients or to someone else to have this experience, or is on a one-to-one basis?
I think one-to-one is a very safe way to let yourself open up, to let yourself do plant medicine, to allow yourself to do sacred medicine, from, whether it be psilocybin, ayahuasca, some other process, or, even to kind of go through an energy healing. It's really nice to create a setting that feels like a temple, that has a holiness to it, a sacredness, that has some boundaries and protection to it. So absolutely, I recommend it as designed for the person. I myself, over the holidays last year, at the very, very end of 22, had a 9-hour ceremony with one person using a sacred medicine, and it was scary. I've done a number of different, orders, and tried different ways to connect with my inner self and, kind of what's outside as well. And there was a little bit too much in my system. Like I was given too much of the actual medicine. And I was scared. For 9 hours, I was walking around. I wasn't even spiritual, to be honest. I was telling jokes for 9 hours. I didn't sit down for 9 hours. I was just walking around telling jokes because it was sort of my coping mechanism for feeling too opened up, until thank goodness there was just one person there, not a whole group intervening. And actually my dead uncle showed up too, which was great to have somebody from the other side, like attending to me. And in the very end, I finally was able to get to the point of it and go, oh, I just got to experience all these things I was scared of. What a beautiful process, and really darn scary too. So having a guide, having a helper, having a helpmate, dead and alive, may I say, that the living person is extraordinarily important while we're in a body as well, kind of really moved me through different of my, what I would call character defects and pain points, into a place of going, oh, hey, you know what? I'm more comfortable. I'm comfortable in my skin. I'm not so scared of almost anything at this point too. But it was a hard process, and I'm glad I had a guidance.
Yes, and I agree that anything beyond 5.5, 6 hours is becoming scary. My longest one was 10.5 and was pretty dramatic, and I don't want to go there again for sure.
I'm not into drama, so I don't need to ever have a drama like that again. I'm personally glad I was able to punch through. For me, it was the fear of the void, not so much what we call the white light and the spirit and all that sort of new age, but beautiful and wonderful and real, kind of experiences and interconnections, but the void, the place of where you feel nothing. And as humans, that's a very scary thing for most of us, because we're physical. We don't like that nothingness, because I didn't even know I had as many control issues as I did. But yeah, 9 hours was too long. So I'm with you.
Moving into something which is very familiar to you, as I mentioned, the chakra systems. You talk about the 12 chakra systems, and I recently took a course on a 13 chakra system put together by a friend of mine, Rainey Marie Hiley. Is any system better than the other, or reveals more information than the other? Let's say it's the 7 or the 8 chakra system.
So here's what I like about any chakra system that goes beyond 7. I think most people agree on the traditional Hindu 7 chakra system. Now, what's interesting about that, though, is Sir Arthur Avalon, or John Woodroffe, who wrote the book, right, that came out in the 1920s, into the 20s, etc., that's about the 7 chakra system, said, this is only one way to approach chakras. There are systems even in India and that Indus Valley that have 2 or 3 chakras, or many, 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 many. what I like about the 7 in-body chakras is it brings us in the body. And as I know you know, we're in a body. We're to be embodied. We're not supposed to ignore feelings, emotions, physicality, what to eat, what not to eat that's good for us and sustains us, etc. So it's really good to be drawn in. I I hanker after the chakra systems that have out-of-body chakras, however, because we already know because of science and ancient spirituality that we're so much more than the body. We don't start and stop at the skin. We're only made out of fields of light and sound. That's it. 99.999% of all the energy that is me is subtle. Most of that's subatomic. So gosh knows where it is at any given time. So why would we limit ourselves to what we can place only in connection to the spine instead of connecting to energy bodies that might be about the cosmos or our powers or our affiliation with the earth and the cosmos? So I saw those extra 5 chakras when I was a kid. That's why I became familiar with them. When I learned about the 7 chakras, I was like, well, what's that one? Nobody's telling me about that one or, this one. And so I think kind of the more the merrier, as long as it's not too many to memorize or work with. I have a client who uses an Atlantean chakra system. His very favorite and most potent life was in Atlantis. So his chakras look like more of an Atlantean set than not. I do have one book. I would never recommend somebody read it. It's at least 1,000 pages long. And it covers the second half is all chakra systems from around the world. And I could have probably tripled the book, to be honest. It was really a passion for me to go, oh, look what the Incans had, or look what the Aztecs had, or look at this, or look at that. And in the development of that book, I figured out there's many systems. There's many ways to approach it. But if I were going to summarize that one book, I would say almost every culture perceive chakras as graduated bodies of light and sound that help us know who we are and enable the world to be a better place. And they all point to some kind of, I don't care what word we use, cosmic deity, oneness, unifying force that we're part of. So that's the summation of that 1,000-page book. So people don't have to buy it. But I'm the chakras that are out of the body. They expand our consciousness, which is a very good thing.
So is it safe to say that mainly the Eastern world developed their own chakra system and not the Western? And even now, I think the Western world, especially the medical field, is not looking at the body from this perspective.
The Western world definitely isn't, especially allopathic. So it's extraordinarily narrow, and most of the people I know find it very not helpful. I go to the doctor to get my regular checkups. If I break a bone, I'm going to go to the doctor. But even the allopathic community, what if they did understand energy? What if they did start really opening more to the idea of us being made out of sound and light? I mean, we're just starting to use ultrasound to heal, not just check on what's going on. We're just starting to use light in Western allopathic, what we call traditional, that's not, by the way. It's just narrow, lasers and this and that to start to figure out the different bands of light and spectrums and ways to direct it with nanotechnology can actually enable healing. Eastern systems have always been so much more open, because they perceived who we were through their intuitive senses. In Western technology is looking through microscopes and maybe telescopes and, very narrow bands of measurement, whereas most of what's been developed that, kind of expands who we are and helps us help ourselves and help other people was perceived through the extra senses, not only the 5 senses. I'm not knocking the regular 5 senses. Chakras, the 7 basic chakras, and other systems have other chakras in the body too, Marmani points and acupoints and all kinds of things as well. You could call those chakras, they're vortexes of energy. But But we need to have more precision, the way the Eastern mystics have, to be able to say, hey, there really are meridians. We can perceive and feel and sense these meridians through our body senses, but through the extra senses also. And science has been proving that there are meridians flowing through the body. One of my favorite researchers, he's not alive anymore, so I never did get to meet him. But his name was Bjorn Nordenstrom, and he saw the body as bioelectrical, right? Bioenergetic, bioengineering. And he was the one who was able to say, look, there are electrical conductions going through the body. We've had pictures of them conducted in France and other countries. And, you know, when there's an injury, there's a current of injury. It goes through what he saw as meridians in the connective tissue, connected into the cardiovascular system, and then it made its way to the spine, the neurological system, which then interpreted it. So where the body meets the metaphysical, where physical and metaphysical meet, that's our answer for the future right there.
Yes, and we have the Body Electric book. I cannot remember the author.
Robert
Yes,
Becker.
yes. So he did a lot of studies showing that the moment the current goes through the body, the member grows back and, you know, has the tendency to growing back. So that's a fact.
It's a fact. James Oshman, you know, energy medicine. I mean, William Bengston wrote Energy Cure, and it's not technical that way, but he did these studies where they had, you know, rats injected with cancer, and people eventually, his students, who didn't even believe in energy healing, just by thinking about rats not at their premise who were infected with cancer were healed because we're energy fields. And that little flicker of this is curable, this can change. You don't even need to think the word cure. This can transform. We can transform something, especially if it comes out of care and compassion. You know, it's really exciting. My favorite books are like Robert Becker's. It's been around forever. Vibrational medicine, you know, Richard Gerber, that's been around forever. Holographic Universe, Michael Talbot. We've had the knowledge in science for decades. We're finally just starting to really bring it in a little bit more to so-called normative thinking.
Yeah, so let's put it in perspective for those who are good with numbers. How much percentage of the knowledge you put in your books you think is being taught in the medical schools now?
0.01%. I mean, honestly. And I have doctors who are clients. I have psychiatrists send me people. It's available to them. It's in my book. It's not taught them. It's in scientific journals. It's in quantum theory. A lot of this stuff is out there, but it's not being taught. I mean, even some simple things where there's studies, you know, that could help people. You know, they're out there, but why isn't it in the system? I mean, I really don't have an answer for why. Well, I do. It's economics, it's power, it's let's keep the system going. You know, we in America are famous for feeding, you know, the people who are at the top, who are making, you know, kind of their living and their money off of certain ways of approaching the world. But that's got to crumble. That stuff has to crumble.
Yes, and I know an example from two close friends who are naturopaths and here in Canada, and they told me that we've been using certain technologies for the last 10 years very successfully, and now the association told us that they are going to remove them. Makes no sense, but this is what's going to happen.
But in America, we would say it makes sense with CENTS, with the monetary sense. I mean, one of my favorite people I like to research, he's passed too, so I never got to technically meet him, Dr. Raymond Royal Rife. And we have machines that are based on his work, but even those have been diluted. He did enormous research with his microscope, where he had lenses refracting light at different angles. And I've actually seen his research books. They're this big. And he was able to redirecting light in different ways right? Different frequencies, different ways. He was able to change lethal bacteria into non-lethal bacteria, non-lethal bacteria into lethal bacteria, but he was also able to morph microbes. So he was just working on this idea that there are certain families of microbes where one, family, in one form, the microbe's a virus, in another form, it's a bacteria, in another form, it's a parasite. So, our work with like germ theory, I use bleach and wipe out, kind of what I need to wipe out in my bathroom or whatever, right? But that's not really how the world works. And that data is just hidden over and over again. It comes up to the light and then it gets pulled down and comes up and gets pulled down. So hopefully we have a big enough, series of movements where there's enough people just sort of disgusted with what's available and they're going and working in different ways, even if it's just using herbs or supplements or acupuncture or, all these different tools that are available. It's kind of an exciting time because in many countries it is available if you dig.
Yes, and we have the sound therapy, the hyperbaric chambers. There are so many out there, and I think some doctors which have still a spine and empathy for their patients, they can just create private membership associations, and someone will pay $1 for a fee and go for a consultation and get healed. Otherwise, I think this is the only way we can make the system crumble.
And I think it's on the way too. I think that's happening. I think there's enough individuals learning uniquely and separately and on their own because they have a challenge or because they're interested. So they're assembling knowledge for themselves. And because of that, now we've got emerging teachers and emerging practitioners who are sharing this knowledge too. But some of this data has been out. I don't remember when he wrote his book. John Sarno, Sarno, was a chiropractor, and it was a long time ago. I have his book somewhere. I have a big library. Okay, it's a little book. And he had clients heal back spinal issues, subluxations, and all kinds of things, that were ordered to go into surgery. He had them heal because he could just touch the part of the spine or different parts of the spine, help them do emotional release, and the spine would heal. So it's not a mystery that we're intertwined with our feelings, which we know are largely formed from neurotransmitters and they're chemical, but I think they're also of the soul. Could we not add that too? That we're chemical beings and we're also spiritual beings, and wherever we can meet those, I think energy medicine is where those meet, is, what I personally perceive.
Yes, and because you mentioned that we are all energy, the Drunvalo Melchizedek in one of his books, the Flower of Life, one of the volumes, he mentioned a child who was born in a family and he didn't know anything outside the family, but he knew that the salamanders will grow members, their tail or the leg, if it's being cut. And his mind said, okay, if something happens to me, I can grow back my leg. And exactly something like this happened. He had an accident, they had to amputate his leg, and he started to grow back his leg. And there is a lady who filmed the whole process, and when she was about to release the movie, she was fired from that TV station. I'm trying to find her and see if we can put that video online.
Oh, I hope you can, because the more people who know this, the more people will be regrowing again. And we're slow. Technology is useful. I know that we now have computer programs and brain devices that when somebody's paralyzed, they can literally connect the brain back to a part of the body. But we can regrow. One of the things I was always fascinated with, and I remember learning this in biology in high school, is that the developing embryo goes through just about every species state. So for a little while, it's like a salamander. For a little while, it's like a bird. For a little while, it's like a bear, or I'm just, we have many species, but we have the capacity on that cellular level to access those instincts, those ways of running our chemistry that all the species have. I remember when I was doing some sacred medicine several years ago in the jungle in Peru, one of the beings who interconnected with me said, every antidote is within you. It's within you. And so some of the teachings I've had just in the regular Western, educational system, really, it's in those two. That's there. Like, oh, embryonically, we can do what flies can do. Embryonically, we can do what lizards can do. So it's a matter of adding it up and then going with it, right?
Yes.
As individuals, it's kind of hard for me. Sometimes it's sort of hard for me to go, but how do I do that? Right?
Yes.
How do I do that? So I think science is supposed to present some of the hows, and when it's kind of not that good at that. So then we turn to Eastern modalities, Ayurvedic, traditional Chinese medicine, Reiki, hyperbaric chambers, ozone therapy. Those are different hows. But it was just last week I was reading something beautiful. I don't remember what I was reading. I read a lot. I love reading and learning. And there was a spiritual passage where what was unfolded was, for some people, just the trill of a bird can heal a heart condition. For another, it might be surgery. And yet for another, it might be eating, kind of a certain type of grape. So some of what makes this a joyous path is we can learn what's available, but we also have to know what needs to be customized to who we are uniquely too.
Yes, you're right. And yesterday I listened to an interview with Michaela Peterson, Jordan Peterson's daughter. And since she was young, she developed a very terrible disease. It's too complicated for me to replicate the name. But after many years going to the doctor, nothing happened. And she realized that she had to take her health in her own hands, and realize that she has to eat meat only, sirloin, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And she's a beautiful human being right now, full of energy. And this is the only thing she can eat, which it goes against maybe what you think or what I think, but it's good for her. And this is how she's going to go with life from now on.
Don't you love that? Because it is still about us. I had a client several years ago. She came in to see me. She had cancer. I can't remember if it was uterine, and it metastasized, like I think to stage 3. And the doctor was like, well, we don't really think treatment's going to help you, but we could do this and that. And she sat across from me in this very room. This is in my basement. Now it's a studio. And she sat across from me, and I hardly talked the whole time. I'm used to people coming to have me speak or the guide speak through me. I hardly said anything. She talked about her feelings. She talked about her son. She talked about the factory she worked in. She talked about all kinds of things. I don't remember all of it. And then at the end, she said, well, thank you. And she got up and she left. And I'm like, well, you're welcome. And she contacted me 2 or 3 years later. She said, oh, that was such a great discussion. The cancer stopped growing. I've been perfectly fine for these 3 years. I think I just need to come in and talk to you again because it started growing again. And I'm like, well, of course I can have you come in and I'll listen to you. So that was her method. A different client years before then, a woman, her name was Nancy. And I'm not going to share out of circle on this either, but I remember her first name. She came to see me twice, and she had 3rd or 4th stage cancer. She had done radiation and some chemo to shrink it, but it was still malignant. The malignancy was in that, what we call the 2nd chakra, in the abdomen, in her uterine area. And the doctors were like, well, we shrunk enough that we can take some out, but this is going to kill you. And she sat across from me, and all I could see was a fist, intuitively, slamming into her gut. I gave her that input, And she said, my brother used to beat me up when I was growing up. So we did the emotional work, the energetic emotional work about what that felt like, and that his pain and rage at his own life, she was holding that inside of her. So she felt her feelings, she released his energies, and she came back to see me again a few months later. She said, well, the doctors still did the surgery, but when they went in, they could take out the entire mass because it wasn't malignant anymore. So the energy charges causing the malignancy had literally just been stripped away. And, she survived. She went on, I don't know if she's still alive. This was maybe 15 years ago. But it's different. It's like that, different ways for different people. So there needs to be that sense of self-reflection and self-responsibility, but also just understanding the beauty and the mystery of working with energy is like you get to that place that's so-called causal. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle said there's nothing causal, but whatever. It's confusing, right? When you start working with quantum. But you get to that point where you're unfolding and you have more power inside of you now. You can make different choices. What I like to do, if I can, with self or others, is have them perceive that whatever's creating the uncomfortability is meeting a need. Maybe it's an addiction, maybe it's an illness, but you don't need to have any shame around it. If you can get to the point that there can be a need met in a different way, like a healthier way, like eating meat, go for it, go for it. And then what's causing the rubbing, what's bringing up the question mark, the different solution can actually help you be healthier rather than unhealthier.
Yes, it's such a fascinating environment and idea, and the fact that we can go either way on our spiritual path and our life based on the energy we accumulate or exude or the thoughts we think, even the water we drink. And because I'm passionate about water, and still we don't want to believe in this type of let's say subject. And for those watching, I really encourage you, even if you don't believe, try to see what caused stress in your life, in your childhood, in your teenage years, because the disease you have right now or the uncomfortable feeling you have right now can have the root in that past event. So again, even if you don't believe, a healer like Cyndi, and there are others out there you might resonate with, can heal that wound and make you healthy.
It's that uncovering. One of my first memories, and I did have a memory in the womb that I did remember when I was born, after I was born. And I was inside my mom, and my mother was arguing with my father, and I had awareness. I believe I could see. So I was probably a little further along, and I saw the sound waves and the colors and the distortions of their arguments going into me. And I mean, even as a child, I remember that remembrance. And everywhere those sound waves hit me, it was mainly on the left side of the body. I had some kind of a problem or an illness, whether it be a broken foot or ear infections or later heart palpitations when I was in my 30s. And I mean, I find that fascinating that I let myself remember that to kind of beg those questions like, where do these issues originate from? And it's not about blaming. I mean, we just pass them around generation to generation and person to person and, whatever. It's not a blaming. It's that uncovering of origins so we can move into what was there. So we empower ourselves to change it, or to allow it to be changed. Because, I don't think we don't have to do everything ourselves. I mean, come on, there's, like you're saying, there's so many healers, there's so many practitioners, there's so many beautiful therapists and, even cancer specialists and treatments and guides. I mean, I do believe in the invisibles. So we don't need to be alone on our path.
Yes, and what you mentioned about your womb memories, it shows that we are so sensitive, but at the same time so resilient, and we can change and go through the tunnel.
Yeah, the resiliency is important. I went through a stage where I was researching a lot about resilience. See, and it was more like with social scientists, therapist type people researching, like, why do some kids go through a family and they seem to thrive and others just don't? And we are resilient. And I think we bring in certain issues with us. I think we have different life paths. I can never judge somebody's path, to be honest. Maybe they learned as much as they were able to, through a certain round, in this lifetime. And, then it was time for them to go, or then they just surrendered. Maybe they were like, I just don't want to keep doing this. So I don't judge that. But we do have a lot more resiliency than most of us know. We have psychic resiliency, we have psychological resiliency, we have cellular resiliency. We have memories in our cells of our ancestors who got through a disease or got through like a depression or a hard time. So we can access that as well as we can access, kind of the sad giving it up attitude too.
Yes. Cyndi, I read in your book, Subtle Energy Techniques, that the most effective way for interference to steal life energy is to make someone feel angry, sorry, scared, hopeless, and powerless. So is this what happens during the last 3 years? Do you think someone fed on humanity's fears of getting sick or dying?
Absolutely. So I love talking about that idea of interference. And I use that word usually, instead of dark entities or dark forces or light entities and light forces, because a living person or being can be interfering, right? But typically when we talk about interference, we're talking about the more supernatural, the more metaphysical, that which is beyond what's happening, within somebody who's in a body. All right. I find that what's happening today is phenomenally, to me, could be labeled as interference by forces, by not good forces. So the way I typically talk about entities that don't have a body or forces which have probably never had a body, is that the reason that they manipulate, the reason they interfere, the reason that they go after the living, whether that be people or animals or groups or institutions, is to steal energy. I mean, that's largely what it's about. So if I don't want to be dead and I want to still have power, right? I'm going to try to manipulate the living to have them give up their life energy. And the way you do that is by creating addictions, creating, dark emotions, is
dependencies, by
having, dependencies, addictions, diseases, feeling bad about themselves, going and hurting other people. You raise leaders who are going to kill people or hurt people. And, it's more the forces, which are like consciousness bodies, versus entities that I think are really running a lot of what's going on in this planet, creating genocide, racism, sexism. And they could go after big groups of individuals that way. Look at what happened and is happening in Syria, Sudan, Ukraine. Before Putin invaded the Ukraine, I was working with a client. She was a venture capitalist, so a normal person, right? Not really into all this stuff. And she was sort of looking for some ways to steer finances, what to invest in. And I saw this bomb going off. And he did, in fact, later, a couple months later, test a bomb. And I kept seeing Putin with these forces talking to him. And of course, Russia has a long history of believing in the invisibles. All right. Very wonderful psychic research, energetic research, but also, there's a lot of interference everywhere. But I kept seeing this force trying to convince Putin you are a reincarnation of Peter the Great. You need to take back the land. You need to return the land to the motherland. And that seems to be what he's doing. And so there's often forces or entities moving in the great, what we would call the big people, right? The ones with a lot of money, with a lot of power, tempting them, moving them in ways that are disempowering, kind of the everyday person, and almost forcing them to be scared or to follow or this or that. Hitler had an entity. I mean, I talk about this in a lot of my books. He had a friend when Hitler was 17, he had a friend watch Hitler, and he saw this entity go into Hitler and start talking through him. Hitler, during World War I, was in the trenches, and he heard a voice say, "Escape the trench," and he did, and everybody else was killed who was in the trenches. So what forces, what entities were striving through Hitler during a time period in Germany where they were defeated in World War I? They didn't really have a national belief system. They didn't feel good about themselves. The world had turned against them. So he gives them an enemy. He gives them a dark force and a so-called dogma to follow. And look at what happened. Not just Jewish people, lots of different ethnic, cultures were so-called being cleansed, because in that time of them being persecuted and killed, there's energy coming up to feed the dark forces and feed the dark entities. How do we feed this ourselves is the question I think individuals need to ask right now. How are we feeding the hate? How are we feeding these dark forces? America's really bad right now. I'm not going to go into the politics. I'm talking about the forces that are play. I sit back and I kind of say, can't people perceive these? What do we think we're believing in right now? Because a lot of the logic is not logical. A lot of the beliefs aren't beliefs. They're just pure, hypocrisy. It's just pure interference. So I love talking about that because I think as individuals, we're beholden to not go down those paths.
Yes, and this leads me to into another question, because I recently had a discussion with a family member, and we talk about what happened in the last 3 years, and I was trying to explain and put some common sense into what I was saying, and moving around certain things, and I couldn't break through. And later on during my meditation, it came to me, the word innocence came to me, kind of let him still be innocent in his mind, because if you force it too much, he will turn against you, or he won't believe anything else you will say in the future. So let him come to his own understanding on his own terms. So maybe we have to let these people who don't see through now stay innocent, in between quotes, until they will have that revelation on their own.
That's beautiful. I remember studying psychology in, junior high, and learning that basic concept that people don't change their minds. Like, they don't typically just all of a sudden see the light or grow through their family and see what's been going on and change. We do it in little bits. And the more you fight, right, the more resistance somebody builds up, because there's that desire to stay right and righteous and then build the boxes. So that's beautiful. I do think it's just on each of us, very much so anyway, as individuals, to just say, I want to stay in some truth. I want to keep knowing who I am. Where am I to be? How am I to serve? Not in a codependent way, right? But how am I to open up more light? One of the series of books I really like, it's a young adult series called The Dark is Rising, set in Wales by Susan Cooper. And these are kids' books, right? This is like for 7th, 8th, 9th grade, but it's all said in the title of the series in the first book, The Dark is Rising. But the message is, when the dark is rising, so does the light. And that's been that way for a very long time on this planet. And there are souls that are called when the dark is, rising, to come in and shine more truth. It's not a certain color. It's not dark versus light, right? But to open up more truths and to do it in such a way that more and more people are clearly able to see, rather than, kind of pushing the light away too.
Yes, and I'm a fighter, and I think I've been a fighter in previous lives because I really want people to see it and not buy the BS of governments and other institutions, and it's hard. But I learned not to be triggered anymore. When I feel that I'm getting triggered, I have to step back and say, okay, yeah, I understand. Let's move on to another subject.
Well, that's good. I've been an arguer my whole life. I've been about logic. So when people start saying stuff that just makes no sense, I like to go, well, A, B, and C. I took philosophy in college, right? Where you learn the Socratic dialogue, and it really doesn't go over with people when I just start arguing. So I don't go to parties, which is probably quite fortunate. So I don't get into those discussions very often.
Yes, I mean, I can tell you that we are invited only to parties where certain subjects are being allowed.
That's right. That's right.
Cyndi, do you work with inner child, and how important it is for us to heal that aspect of ourselves?
It's vital. And the kind of work I do is pretty spread out. I mean, I'm really fascinated by the studies of and the existence of past lives and reincarnation and in between lives and this realm and that planet and that planet. And you absolutely cannot bypass the inner child work. It's the necessity. I even believe that many of the issues we have in a lifetime, maybe we carried in, but they're recreated in our family systems. My own path involved starting family systems therapy, which is all about working with the inner child and the passing down of shame cycles, addiction cycles, and bringing in others' emotions and living them out. I started therapy at age 19. So I've been able to tend to the psychological aspect of my own growth, and I try to bring it into the energy system as often as I can. It's pretty tempting in spiritual communities to do what's sometimes called spiritual bypassing or emotional bypassing. I'm just going to meditate. Well, good for you. But if you have an angry inner child, that angry inner child is going to throw something at somebody, right? Or, just sort of, kind of just go into la la land and do a past life and never address the feelings that you had when mom was yelling at you or when you were abandoned. After decades, I'm still working inner child work with myself. It's not quite the same. I'm not surprised by that much. You know what I mean? It's more like it's almost a comfortable path because I have more gentleness with myself and more kindness. And, certainly greater reserves and more self-responsibility around what I'm going to do with a traumatized inner self or how I'm going to help that self. But I think it's imperative. I really do.
Yes. And the more I learn, the more I realize that the work we have to do on ourselves in this lifetime is another challenge, not just going through life and achieve certain physical goals, but working on ourselves through what happened in previous lives and what happened in our early stages of this life. And that's paramount. And I think 95% of us won't do it in this lifetime. We don't realize how important it is to start this work.
Well, there's even really interesting studies on diseases that most of the diseases that somebody catches or goes through, whether it be, and I don't mean you catch emotional illness, but the emotional and mental and physical, much of that actually starts in the womb. So, we're inside of our mom. We're taking on feelings, we're having experiences, we're born. Those early months are critical, and they're nonverbal. And so those are often the most potent places to work, until we're like 2 or 3. We're absorbing, we're interacting, we're making conclusions without our brain being really clear. So a lot of that nonverbal work is sometimes the somatic, sometimes even the most powerful work that we can do. So I like approaches like EMDR, eye movement desensitization, kind of therapy, and some forms of hypnosis or brain spotting or energy work that brings you into those early experiences, because we're unlocking ourselves. And what we work through at those earliest of ages, we get to grow up even more, into who we really are, no matter what our age is right now.
Yes, and a very good friend of mine used to do the rebirthing process in the 80s and 90s. And I know he helped a lot of people to relieve those birthing traumas and get better.
Absolutely. When I work with my therapist, who's also a Sufi and Jewish and works with a lot of different modalities, but we work with, she's a Sufi, so she uses the word Allah, the divine, and we work with the divine to help with that reparenting. But it's usually age 1 for me, age 1, age 2, age 3. I'd love to know that I'm cleaned out at some point, but but kind of in the meantime, there's always a wisdom. There's always a wisdom to grow, and there's always a way that I have a softer understanding than of other people. I think that's critical. My youngest son is 24, and for about 2-3, he's gone to therapy since he was 4. Okay, let's just be honest. I went to his therapist to learn how to be a good parent for him. But he has spent the last 2 to 3 years, really intensely the last year, really importantly, what did mom do? What did dad do? How did it impact me? And he just brings it up. It's a beautiful process. He has a great way of saying it. He'll call me. He goes, now, Mom, I don't want you to be hurt but that anxiety that you had, and this is how it impacted me, Mom. He's just doing this amazing job of growing himself. And I feel really honored that he can bring this up with me, because I have so much to learn from his feedback to me. He actually spent a month and a half on the road this summer. He didn't do what was his next goal in life. He said, I need to unplug. He spent a month and a half on the road, traveling to see different friends, and their dialogue was mainly, how did their parents impact them? And what have they done with it? And what do they want to do differently? Isn't that amazing? In your 20s, I was in therapy, but there's that much consciousness that you don't have to only go to therapy. You can talk to people like your friends about it. I'm encouraged about the next generations. I'm encouraged.
So he's in the process of peeling off the emotional onion.
Yes, he is. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yep. What did he pick up from mom? What did he pick up from dad? What did he do with it? He's very clear that he's owning responsibility. Here's what I've done with it. Here's why he's a baseball pitcher. Here's why I get scared on the mound. And he's kind of cute about it when he goes back to pitching. He said, now, Mom, I only want you to come once a month because I just don't want to pick up on your feelings. But you can still be my mom. I still need you to help me with X, Y, and Z. So, we're all finding our way through, and we need to give ourselves space for that, no matter what our age is, too.
Yes, indeed. Cyndi, another important aspect of ourselves is the higher self. What's the best approach to connect with our higher self?
Do it inside, not outside. I mean, you can use plant medicine and connect with different beings. It's really, really important, though, to connect with the higher self, your spirit, your essence in your body. Typically I invite people, and many people in this field do this too, to find their center. I like to work with the very, very, very inside of the heart chakra. I find that in there, it's easiest to connect with our higher self, or I call it the spirit or the essence. and the oneness, and to do it physiologically too. So change occurs best. And when we die, the changes can best come with us if we also do it in our chemistry, if we do it in the physiology, if we do it within, kind of the physical vessel that we're inhabiting. And, that way we change the world a little bit. Our cells are from Earth. Most of our cells, actually, the elements we're made out of came from the sky, to be honest. So, when we're doing that kind of alchemy in the body, breathing into the middle, I call it sometimes the divine spot or the divine chamber, and just getting used to doing that and giving permission for that higher self, that spiritual self to kind of be in charge. It's not going to elbow out an inner child who needs attention. It's not going to have you ignore the reason you're rageful or drinking wine, but it's going to love and accept these aspects of you that need more cleansing and understanding. So find that place within you and give permission for your higher self or your spirit to run things. Not that long ago, I was doing some other types of medicine, and I had 2 people attending me. It was wonderful. I grew a lot. I could hear my own higher self, my guide. I called it my higher soul. My guide was me. My guide was me. Like I would have a set of images that were very cool, like, wow, look at those colors. And the voice would more often than not say, Cyndi, don't pay attention to those. What's the meaning of this? What are you to gain? What are you to learn? And I'd want to go off on tangents, like I never did LSD, but like what I would imagine an LSD trip would be. And my higher self soul would go, no, that's not the point of this. Those are just pictures. This is about how do you bring in love? So I think the more we cultivate that relationship really personally and in the body, the more we evolve. And I don't mean evolve out of being a human, evolve into what being a human means.
Yes, and reach our full potential.
Exactly. That's the point.
Yes, yeah. Beautiful. Cyndi, are there any particular programs or seminars you like to mention in this discussion?
People can just go on my website. It's a one-stop shop, CyndiDale.com, spelled weird, CYNDI. And I was given that spelling during a shamanic journey, by the way. That's not how I was told to spell it when I was growing up. I have a lot of really cool programs that come out periodically through the Shift Network. I have my own, kind of apprenticeship program. If you can't afford a program, there's a lot of YouTubes out there, too. The books tend to be inexpensive. Some of them have been out for a while, so they're like really inexpensive on Amazon these days. So there's free material out there that you can get if you also, punch in my name in a topic area that you're interested in. You'll probably come up too with a YouTube or a podcast or, a download or something, that's simple. I had somebody who couldn't afford my book on Kundalini, so she just Googled Golden Kundalini, one of the forms I work with, and she got an article that was in, I think, LA Yoga or something. So she could learn about, these topics that way too.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I know there's so much we can talk about, but we have to keep it concise. We are approaching the end of the interview. Any final thoughts, please?
How about joy?
Beautiful.
How about joy? I believe all feelings are real. All of them are important. Everything we're devoting ourselves to is grace. And I do believe that as we open ourselves to what's inside, ultimately, some version of joy will also open up. Maybe it's just relief or contentment or satisfaction or tiredness. Now I get to sleep. But I do think there's versions of joy, gratitude, appreciation that, is sort of the reward in the middle of this.
Yes, and joy and gratitude will annihilate the fear, the worries, will annihilate those entities who are trying to suck our energy. So that's a good point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to my guests, thank you for watching. Like it, share it, download a free copy of my book when you visit my website. Don't forget that the new website spiritualinspired.ca is live, and you can find all the previous interviews there, video and audio. And until next time, love and gratitude.